So picture a high-end recording studio. The producer is sitting behind this massive glowing console.
Oh, yeah, totally soundproof.
All right, completely pristine. The vocals are painstakingly pitch corrected. All those rough acoustic edges are, digitally smoothed over.
Until the final track emerges completely flawless.
Exactly. It's pristine, but now take that pristine soundboard, drag it out into the freezing rural stretches of northern Canada, and just, I don't know, cover it in mud, cheap beer, and sawdust.
Which sounds like a total nightmare for an audio engineer.
A complete nightmare. But that deliberate, joyful mess is actually the aesthetic of the band we are exploring today.
It really is. It's a complete inversion of what the modern music industry tells us a successful band is supposed to sound like.
Right.
We're looking at a musical landscape that intentionally, vehemently rejects refinement.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We
Yeah.
are exploring one of the most fascinating cultural paradoxes in recent music history.
It's a wild one.
It really is. Today, we're pulling from a really in-depth column by Monumental Movement Records. And we're looking at how a band playing American Southern acoustic music somehow became the ultimate, undeniable symbol of French-Canadian working-class pride.
Yeah, the Quebec Redneck Bluegrass Project, or QRBP for short.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the paradox is glaring from the very second you hear their name. I mean, bluegrass is a genre formalized in the mid-20th century, right?
Yeah, by American musicians, guys like Bill Monroe.
Right. Deep in the Appalachian region of the American South, yet QRBP formed in the early 2000s, way up in the Saguenay region of Quebec.
Which is a massive geographical, linguistic, and cultural leap. I mean, it's practically a different world.
Completely. And for you listening, whether you're a hardcore bluegrass aficionado or, you've literally never listened to a banjo in your life, the reason this matters goes way beyond just music.
Definitely.
We live in an era of highly polished, algorithm-driven content. Everything around us is smoothed out for mass consumption.
Everything has a filter on it.
Exactly. So this deep dive is an exploration of raw, authentic, community-driven culture that absolutely refuses to be smoothed out.
And that refusal is baked into every single chord they play.
Yeah.
But to really grasp how they pulled this off, we first have to deconstruct what they actually sound like.
Right, because it's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. If you turn on a mainstream country radio station today, you'll hear very polite, cleanly picked acoustic instruments. QRBP is the absolute antithesis of that.
It is a volatile, aggressive collision of sounds.
Yeah.
We're talking about traditional American bluegrass instruments.
Yeah.
So the banjo, the mandolin, the upright bass, but they're being played with the frantic, sweat-soaked energy of a punk rock show.
Or a gritty garage band?
Yes. Layered with these old-school, working-class labor songs from Quebec.
The source text talks about this concept of an anti-sophistication aesthetic. They aren't trying to impress anyone with technical virtuosity. There were no flawless arpeggios here.
No, not at all.
Like, a banjo is historically a rhythmic, driving instrument, but in their hands, it's almost treated like a punk guitar. It's being strummed so hard, the strings might actually snap.
And the upright bass, it isn't just keeping time.
Oh, it's being flapped and punished. It creates this thunderous, physical heartbeat for the music.
Okay, wait, let me stop you there. Because if the banjo sounds like a distorted punk guitar, and the vocals are rough, loud, and maybe a bit off-pitch.
Very off-pitch sometimes.
Right. Then why are people buying this? Doesn't it just sound like a bad bar band that hasn't practiced enough?
Well, that is the genius of the anti-sophistication aesthetic. The roughness isn't a mistake. It's the entire point.
Oh, interesting.
When you hear a voice that hasn't been auto-tuned or a mandolin chop that's a fraction of a second ahead of the beat, your brain instinctively registers it as human.
It feels real.
Exactly. They intentionally avoid overproduction because they want the physical reality of their lives stamped directly into the recordings.
Stamped into the recordings. I love that phrasing. It really captures the physical toll.
Think about the daily reality of the people in the Saguenay region. We're talking about long highway drives through dense forests.
Yeah.
The brutal physical exhaustion of working in lumber yards or, aluminum smelting plants. And, of course, the deep freezing cold of a Quebec winter.
Which is no joke.
Not at all. You cannot accurately capture the fatigue of a 60-hour manual labor week with a polished, auto-tuned pop song. It would just sound entirely fake.
The friction of the music matches the friction of the life. When I was going through the source material, the visual that kept popping into my head wasn't like a velvet-lined concert hall.
No, definitely not.
Listening to QRBP feels like you've just survived a freezing, brutal work week. You push open the heavy wooden door of a rowdy, packed neighborhood pub, and the heat and noise just hit you right in the face.
And that feeling of the neighborhood pub naturally leads to a huge historical question.
Which is?
Well, if you want to express the visceral reality of rural Quebec life,
Yeah.
why choose American bluegrass to do it?
Right, because why not just stick purely to traditional French-Canadian folk music? Quebec has a massive musical heritage of its own.
It does, but those two heritages are actually much closer than you might think.
Wait, really?
Yeah, while bluegrass was being codified in the American South, Eastern Canada, particularly the rural areas of Quebec, had already developed its own incredibly rich fiddle and dance music traditions.
So the underlying musical DNA was already a match.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of it. Traditional Quebec folk music relies heavily on something called potorhythmy.
Right, which is the seated foot tapping.
Yeah, it creates a really loud, driving percussion. It also features fast, relentless 2/4 time signatures designed to keep people dancing all night.
And bluegrass relies on that exact same driving runaway train tempo?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So when QRBP started introducing the banjos and the mandolins into local Quebec bars, it wasn't some jarring foreign invasion.
It wasn't like an alien landing.
No. It was more like introducing two closely related musical cousins who just immediately hit it off.
Oh, that makes so much sense. The shared rural tavern culture of Quebec already resonated with the rural front porch culture of the Appalachian Mountains.
The instruments were different, sure, but the assignment was the same. Play fast, play loud, and give working people a reason to dance away their
Now,
exhaustion.
here's where it gets really interesting, though. They didn't just copy-paste the American version.
Right.
My favorite concept from our research is how QRBP handled this cultural exchange. They didn't put on cowboy hats, fake a Southern drawl, and pretend they were from Tennessee.
Not at all.
They took American bluegrass, buried it in the frozen Quebec soil, and let it completely re-ferment.
Re-fermenting is the perfect way to describe it.
I thought so too.
They swapped the American lyrical tropes of riding trains and drinking Appalachian moonshine for their own local realities. So driving snowmobiles through the bush and drinking caribou, which is a traditional Quebec alcoholic drink,
They grounded the American sound in local dirt.
which is actually a profound cultural achievement when you consider the political backdrop of Quebec.
Oh, for sure. For generations, the province has fiercely defended its French language identity against the massive English-speaking North American majority surrounding it.
There's a deeply ingrained cultural defense mechanism against importing English-American media.
But they somehow got past that.
Because that macro-political tension is very real. But down at the grassroots level, in the local pubs, the logging camps, the rural villages there, has always been a shared universal language of hardship, labor, and weekend celebration.
So by focusing strictly on that shared rural reality, QRBP managed to seamlessly merge southern U.S. musical sensibilities with Quebec folk.
They bypassed the political border entirely by connecting on the level of the soil.
Wow.
They proved that a working-class lumberjack in Saguenay actually has a lot more in common with a working-class coal miner in Appalachia than with a wealthy cosmopolitan banker sitting in downtown Montreal.
The class and geographic alignments supersede the linguistic divide. That shared kinship makes the musical fusion make perfect sense. But if we're talking about defending their unique identity, we have to talk about the name.
Yeah, the name is a big sticking point.
Calling yourselves the Quebec Redneck Bluegrass Project is wild. I mean, in the English-speaking world, redneck is traditionally a derogatory term.
Yeah, it's an insult used to dismiss rural laborers as uneducated or unsophisticated.
Right. So why on earth would a band trying to celebrate their local culture actively brand themselves with a known slur?
What's fascinating here is that it's a phenomenal example of linguistic reclamation. They're taking a word designed to marginalize them and turning it into a battle standard.
Like a badge of honor.
Exactly. By putting redneck front and center in their name, QRBP is signaling a proud, unapologetic distance from urban elites.
They are completely owning the stereotype to disarm it. Like, you think we're rough around the edges, we'll put it on the poster.
And they are weaponizing it against cultural homogenization.
Yeah.
Translating redneck into the Quebec context means embracing the identity of les régions, the remote regional areas. It means wearing flannel shirts, driving beat-up pickup trucks, throwing parties in the woods, and completely rejecting the cosmopolitan cafe culture of the big cities.
This reveals that incredible dual defense mechanism. We talked about the first layer, right? The entire province of Quebec defending its French culture against English-speaking North America.
Right.
But QRBP adds a second internal layer of defense. They are the rural periphery of Quebec defending itself against the urban centers of Quebec.
Because Montreal has historically been the center of the Quebec cultural industry.
Right, they set the trends.
Yeah, Montreal dictates what is cool, what is sophisticated, and what is worthy of being funded and celebrated as art. QRBP's entire existence is a rejection of that urban-centric value system.
It's a loud declaration that you don't have to move to the city, adopt a slick wardrobe, and smooth out your accent to make it as an artist.
They're saying our tavern culture is valid art just as it is.
And that philosophy, that fierce collective rural pride, isn't just a lyrical theme printed on a CD booklet, right? It physically dictates where and how their music is consumed.
Oh, absolutely. If you are actively thumbing your nose at urban elites and polished recording studios, you can't exactly go play a sit-down concert in a velvet-lined theater.
So where do you even perform music that is designed to be this deliberately unrefined?
You take it directly to the local bars, the community halls, the open fields. The live show is where the entire ethos of the Quebec Redneck Bluegrass Project actually materializes into the real world.
The early gigs in the Saguenay region sound like absolute chaos in the best possible way.
Total chaos.
I mean, there is no quiet, polite appreciation. You aren't sitting with your hands folded, nodding along thoughtfully to a complex mandolin solo.
No, you get trampled.
Exactly. The accounts of these shows describe people shouting, heavy drinking, bodies colliding, and everyone just singing at the top of their lungs.
It's an environment of total sensory overload and collective effervescence.
The best analogy is that there is no fourth wall. It's not a band elevated on a pedestal playing down to an audience.
Right, it feels more like a massive neighborhood bonfire where whoever happens to be holding the guitar is leading the song.
The band is just an extension of the crowd.
And in that space, nobody cares if you have a deep knowledge of music theory or, the history of Appalachian instruments. The only currency that matters in a QRBP show is participation.
You just have to show up.
You just have to be in the room sweating, stomping your feet, and being part of the heat.
Think about how radical that is when we contrast it with how you and I consume music today. I mean, think about how sterile music consumption can feel right now.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is often a highly isolated individual experience today.
Right. We put on noise-canceling headphones to block out the world. We listen alone on the subway. Our tastes are fed to us by proprietary algorithms designed to keep us scrolling through 15-second videos.
It is a hyper-curated, lonely way to experience art. Against that modern backdrop, QRBP's live shows function as a physical countermovement to digital isolation.
They force you into the real world.
They are creating a temporary, undeniable community in real time. It's a space where physical bodies have to interact, where the beer spills, and where the energy of the crowd literally alters how the song is played that night.
It is the absolute antithesis of the algorithmic feed.
Exactly.
It's incredibly visceral. But hang on, I have to ask, because every indie DIY band starts out with this sweaty, intimate, man-of-the-people energy.
Sure.
But playing to 50 of your neighbors in a local pub is one thing. What happens when the checks get bigger?
Ah, right.
I mean, once they blew up and hit the main stage at massive Quebec summer festivals playing to tens of thousands of people, didn't they eventually clean up? Don't bands always get shiny, coordinate their outfits, and add a polished light show? Did QRBP sell out?
It is the trap almost every successful band falls into, but the source material is really clear on this. QRBP actively refused to play the rockstar game. Really? Even as they scaled up to major festival stages, they vehemently refused to be deified. They maintained the dirt.
But how do you maintain the dirt when you were standing on a 50-foot stage with massive LED screens?
By completely ignoring the stage's grandeur. They didn't adopt rock god posturing. They didn't bring in backing tracks.
So what did they do?
They would literally bring their own cheap coolers of beer onto the stage.
No way.
Yes, they wore the exact same worn-out flannel and work boots they would wear to a backyard barbecue. They maintained the reality that they were standing on the exact same ground as the audience, just slightly elevated.
Wow. They essentially forced the giant commercial festival stage to become a local Saguenay tavern, rather than changing themselves to fit the commercial expectations.
Precisely. In a sea of highly produced, slick festival acts with choreographed movements, a band that looks and sounds like a group of ecstatic laborers throwing a messy party stands out immensely.
I can imagine.
Their raw, unpolished presence, which, could have been seen as a huge liability on a massive stage, actually became their most powerful magnetic asset. They brought the local temperature of their hometown to the macro level without altering the thermostat.
Which really brings us to the ultimate legacy of the Quebec Redneck Bluegrass Project. They proved that a deeply regional working-class culture can become a powerful modern musical force without having to be artificially urbanized.
They didn't have to dilute who they were to be accepted by the masses.
They took the specific freezing temperature of a northern Quebec winter and the camaraderie of a local rural tavern, and they translated that into a phenomenon that resonates far beyond their hometown.
They showed that you can take something incredibly local and make it universal. And not by sanding down the edges to make it easily digestible, but by sharpening those edges so they leave a mark.
And that brings this exploration right back to you listening to this dive. We spend so much of our lives trying to smooth things out, don't we?
We really do.
We filter our photos, we auto-correct our messages, and we curate our online personas to avoid any friction. But QRBP shows us that friction, the messy, unpolished reality of real human connection, is what actually resonates with us as authentic.
The imperfections are where the human warmth actually lives. I mean,
Mhm.
a missed chord or a cracked vocal note tells us there's a real person on the other side of the sound.
Exactly. So as you go about the rest of your day, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think back to that pristine, perfectly polished recording studio we started with.
The one with the glowing console.
Right, and think about how sterile it feels compared to a chaotic, muddy, joyful pub. QRBP managed to take the overlooked, unpolished aspects of their specific local geography and turn them into a globally recognized badge of honor. So look around your own life, your own hometown. What forgotten, delightful, wonderfully rough traditions in your own local area might hold the perfect antidote to our highly curated, isolated digital world?
It's a powerful reminder to just stop smoothing out the edges.
Keep seeking out the roughness. Thanks for taking the plunge with us today.